At one time, Lori and Charles Vallow were happily married. For Lori, Charles was her fourth husband, the one she had been with the longest. They were raising Lori's daughter Tylee, and together they adopted little JJ. But by early 2019, things began to change. Lori's embrace of apocalyptic prophecies and self-proclaimed divinity cast a shadow over their marriage. She believed she was chosen to lead 144,000 souls in preparation for Jesus' imminent return. And she warned Charles that she would kill him if he impeded her sacred mission. Fearing for his life, Charles sought help, citing Lori's threats and erratic behavior. Their once shared home became a battleground of spiritual warfare, with Lori accusing Charles of being possessed by dark spirits, branding him a zombie. The culmination of this domestic turmoil arrived on July 11th, 2019, when Charles was shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who claimed self-defense. However, prosecutors now allege a sinister conspiracy, asserting that Lori and Alex orchestrated Charles's death to clear the path for her union with Chad Daybell, the doomsday prophet. Lori denies the charges and is now representing herself in this high-stakes murder trial, and today she delivered her opening statement, and tonight you will hear all the big moments. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you aboard. What a big day at Court TV. Like a huge day today inside the courtroom. Opening statements are a very important part of the trial. Very important. Probably for lawyers, the second most important moment for them, for the prosecutor or the defense attorney, because we all know what the most important moment is for them, right? Of course, it's closing arguments, just like this show. But opening statements are significant because it sort of sets the tone for the trial and outlines what the evidence will be. It's the filter through which the jury hears the evidence. Now, one of the most effective opening statements that I've ever seen was the one done by Jose Baez years ago, because it turned that trial upside down. All along, it was all about a mother who didn't report her child missing for 30 days, and then all of a sudden he told us, well, the child was never missing. And oh, by the way, George Anthony is a child rapist. Like, it changed everything. Like, it wasn't true, but it changed everything, right? The allegations that were made, there was no evidence presented to support the allegations against George Anthony, but it completely turned that case upside down. So you see how much impact they can have. Now, the case that we're covering now out of Arizona, day one today, is all about Charles Vallow being shot. And he was shot by Alex Cox. Alex Cox is the brother of Lori Vallow at the time, Lori Daybell now. But that's what the case is about, right? It's about Alex Cox shooting Charles Vallow, but it's why did he do it? What was the motivation? Was it actually self-defense, or was there some conspiracy that was set up beforehand to target and take the life of Charles Vallow? That's what prosecutors are saying happened. But today, Lori Daybell, right, Vallow at the time, delivered her own open because she's representing herself. Now, did she turn the case on its head upside down like Jose Baez? No, no. She's not a lawyer. But don't shortchange what she did today, because she spoke. And she is going to be able to, through speaking and representing herself, be able to testify throughout the entire trial. And that's really what she was doing in her opening statement, because everything she described that happened when Charles Vallow was shot by her brother Alex Cox was witnessed by other people, but they are all dead. They're all gone. 2 at the hands of Lori herself, which the jury doesn't know. And then Alex apparently died of some other thing, right? You can be suspicious, I am, but it's supposedly natural causes, although the timing was very, very, very questionable. But I think she changed the game a little bit here in terms of getting her story out, and I think the jury will understand that that story is coming from her. Again, she's the only, I mean, there were 5 people there, and only 1 is alive, and it's her. So who else could testify to any of that stuff? So every time she talks about what the evidence will show, it's basically what she is going to tell them during the course of the trial. So the other part of it was she did get emotional. Like there was some level of emotion there. So if you're a juror, you don't know Lori Daybell. You don't know the whole doomsday story. You don't know she's a child killer. You don't know she's a liar and a cheater and all that. You could potentially be moved by that and the way she painted Charles as the villain in all of this. So it was a big day. It was a big day inside the courtroom. So let's take you inside the courtroom so you can watch, really, for the first time in a courtroom at least, we're hearing Lori Daybell tell her story.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have been charged with a crime, a serious crime. And the only question here is, did I commit this crime? Conspiracy. Conspiracy is an agreement between 2 or more people to commit a crime. Just want to move this. Okay, so you see. Okay. There has to be an agreement. There has to be a plan. The evidence in this case will show that Charles Vallow and I got married in February 2006. It will show that it was my 4th marriage and Charles' 3rd marriage. At that time, we each had 2 children. I had Colby, who was 9, and Tylee, who was 3. Charles had Cole, who was also 9, and Zach, who was 7. The evidence will show that our family moved from Austin, Texas to Chandler, Arizona in 2009. The evidence will show that Charles and I adopted our great-nephew, JJ, who was born in 2012. The evidence will show that Charles was a licensed life insurance salesman and worked as an independent contractor, selling life insurance policies and annuities, and owned his own business. The evidence will show that Charles and I purchased life insurance policies early in our marriage, and Charles had them issued to the maximum amount possible to each of us. The evidence will show that Charles was 17 years older than me, and that because of Charles' age and an issue that he had with high blood pressure, the maximum amount of life insurance that could be approved for Charles was $1 million. The maximum amount of life insurance that I could be approved for because of my age and my health was $2 million. The evidence will show that Charles and I had a happy marriage for 13 years, that he was, in fact, a baseball player, and that he played high school, college ball, and AAA ball, and that he was, in fact, a left-handed pitcher, a southpaw, they call him, but he was a right-handed batter, as could be attested to by anybody who knew Charles well and his high school baseball coach, Greg Davis. The evidence will show that Tylee was and in 2014, our family moved from Chandler, Arizona to Kauai, Hawaii. We lived there for 3.5 years and returned to Chandler in 2017. The evidence will show that Tylee was 3 years old when Charles and I got married, and that when she became a teenager, the relationship between Tylee and her stepfather, Charles, became so difficult that Tylee and Charles had to seek a therapist, a family therapist, to stop them from fighting. The evidence will show that together, Charles and Tylee met with this therapist after we moved back to the mainland in 2017. The evidence will show that in April of 2018, Tylee's biological father passed away from a heart attack. And at that time, Charles called Social Security and made an appointment at the Social Security office.
I'm going to object to hearsay.
Sustained.
It will show that we did get Social Security for Tylee for her deceased father, until she was 18 years old, and she was 15 years old at the time. Charles and Tylee had major increasing arguments, two in February of 2019, one of March in 2019, which was captured on video, one in May of 2019, one in June of 2019, and then the worst of all, in July 2019. The evidence will show that Charles insisted on flying into Phoenix on July 10th. As we've heard from the state. The evidence will show that I advised Charles that he could not stay with us at the Chandler house because he could not get along with Tylee, and I did not want them to get into another fight like they had 3 weeks prior. That Charles showed up at our Chandler residence around 7:30 in the rental car I booked for him on the morning of Thursday, July 11th, 2019. The evidence will show that when Charles entered the house, only JJ and I were awake and present. The evidence will show that after we put JJ in the rental car, that Charles came back into the residence to receive his phone, leaving JJ in the front seat of the rental car with the engine running. He was 7 years old. The evidence will show that Charles began to scream at me when I refused to hand him his phone. The evidence will show that Charles' screaming woke up Tylee and Alex. The evidence will show that Tylee came out of her room with a bat to protect me, her mother, from her stepfather, Charles Vallow. The evidence will show that Tylee and Charles fought over the bat, and that after a struggle over the bat, Tylee fell onto the ground, and Charles lifted up the bat to hit Tylee with the bat. The evidence will show that Alex then intervened to protect Tylee from being hit with the bat. He did not have a gun. He was not wearing a shirt. He was pulling up his jeans because he just woke up and came into the room where he heard the screaming. The evidence will show that Alex and Charles got into a physical struggle for the bat and fell onto the ground. The evidence will show that Tylee, who was on the ground, was lifted up by me and sent outside to get away from the struggle and to protect JJ, who was still in the running car, in the rental car in the driveway. The evidence will show that after this struggle on the ground between Charles and Alex, that Charles prevailed with the bat and began to come towards me with the bat as I ran away from him into the kitchen. The evidence will show that at some point while I was running away from Charles, who was chasing me with the bat, that Alex apparently retrieved his gun. The evidence will show that I ran outside to the children and that Alex shot Charles in self-defense.
She did get a tissue today in court. I mean, like I told you, she's showing her emotion during the opening statement. Now a lawyer's not going to do that, but if you are, the defendant, the accused murderer, and it's, your family that we're talking about, I guess it came off almost as natural, I guess, especially for people who don't know her. We know her. We know the history. But I would presume that most of the jurors don't. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft. She was inside the courtroom today, joining us live tonight from Arizona. Kelly, great to see you tonight. Appreciate you coming on. I know it's a long day for you, a super long day. What did you observe inside that courtroom during Lori's historical opening statement today?
Good evening to you, Vinnie. When Lori was delivering her opening statement, especially when she became emotional, Vinnie, jurors began leaning in. So as you mentioned, you used the word natural. It did come across as natural to the jurors because they were listening. She was talking, she was delivering her opening statement, talking about her daughter, Tylee, and how Charles and Tylee did not get along, how they had to go to counseling. And then she became emotional when she said that Charles had the bat. So the jurors listened, and they were really interested in what she had to say. And at one point, you heard her ask there, you mentioned that she wanted a tissue, and then eventually she composed herself, and she got out a few times that this is a case of self-defense, that originally the officer said this was just self-defense. The state objected to that, so she had to pause at times and then regain exactly what she was trying to say and refocus. But she did say that a few times, and you could tell the jurors were just questioning and wondering, maybe there's more to this case than what we thought. But those were some insights from inside the courtroom. It was packed in there. People lined up early this morning, Vinnie, to try to get a seat inside. Then eventually there were no seats inside the courtroom for those opening statements, and we do expect that to be the case throughout this entire trial.
Yeah, there is a whole lot more to the story that the jury likely won't hear, right? The fact that Lori is a convicted double murderer, child killer. Also took part in the murder of her current husband's prior wife. But they're not going to hear that stuff. But there is definitely, of all the cases involving Lori Daybell, this is the one that, you know, what exactly happened here, because there's only one person alive who was there, and it's Lori. Everybody else is dead, so you're not going to hear other versions from those folks. Now, let's talk about the prosecutor. They have the burden, as they do in every case, and here you've got the prosecutor going against the pro se, puts even a little more pressure on you. What can you tell us about the prosecution's open?
The prosecutor was very straightforward, saying the evidence is going to clearly show that Lori did this, that she conspired with her brother to kill her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and that it also was premeditated. She said the text messages are going to show you that this is exactly what Lori did. So she just went through the facts, Vinnie, laying them all out. I will say just some of the people inside the courtroom were saying, wow, this case also has a lot of characters, a lot of people in it, but it's nothing like the prior trial for Lori Daybell, in which we've talked with one of the former jurors on that case who was here inside the courtroom in Phoenix, Arizona. And he said that case, it took him about a third way through the trial until he understood all the players. Here, we're only talking about one person, Charles Vallow, who was killed. But there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of people that the jurors do have to keep track of. So the prosecution did her best. The prosecutor did her best to lay that all out. But as soon as the trial keeps going forward and more forward, I'm certain the jurors will get a better understanding of who all the characters are.
Yeah, like everything involving this saga, I guess we could call it, everything has different layers to it. And, you know, how much of this will the jury peel back the whole doomsday aspect of it? Will they fully comprehend that? Will that be a big part of what's going on here? Like you said, the last juror took him a third of the trial to kind of figure out what was going on here. You know, we were covering this, and it took years to really dig in. And then even today, with Lori speaking about this, we get another perspective on everything. Now, first witness took the stand. What can you tell us?
So the first witness, we heard from law enforcement officials today. That took up the majority of the day, in addition to the opening statements, which really were the highlight, because everyone was waiting to hear what Lori had to say during that opening statement, in which the first time we saw in a long time that she actually showed some real remorse. So the first witnesses got up on the stand. Direct examination, cross-examination, then by Lori. Why don't we go ahead and play a little bit of Lori questioning one of the law enforcement officials. This is about Alex Cox's demeanor and how he was coming across as nonchalant. Let's play that.
You said that the individual exiting the house was nonchalant. Is that correct?
I don't know if I used those words, but he seemed very calm, yes.
Very calm.
Yes.
Is that the same thing to you as nonchalant?
I wouldn't use that word, so I would say he looked very calm and unbothered.
But you said nonchalant a minute ago.
I don't recall saying that.
Okay. Does everyone act the same in a stressful situation that you've experienced? No? Are you qualified to give someone a psychological evaluation?
No.
No. You put your hand on my husband's neck for checking for a pulse. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what you did when you first came in?
Yes.
Did you perform CPR?
No,
No. Why not?
because it was apparent to me that he was deceased.
And that's not your protocol?
To what?
To perform CPR until fire comes in?
Not if it's going to make it even worse because they had apparent gunshot wounds to the chest.
When the body camera footage was played of the paramedic rendering aid to Charles Vallow, we could tell Kay Woodcock got emotional inside the courtroom. Vinnie, we're now taking a look at some body camera footage. This is when Alex Cox was making his way out of the house, appearing nonchalant. You can see him there sitting down on the curb. At one time, he does put his hand behind his head, indicating that he had some sort of injury from when they claim that Charles Vallow hit him with the baseball bat. And then we heard from Lori on this body camera footage as well. Let's go ahead and play that. Well, I guess we don't have that, but Lori is just talking about.
How long
here
have
she
you
is.
guys lived here?
I'm sorry?
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
So you heard there Lori just talking about the neighbors. But Vinnie, yeah, I have to tell you, in talking with some people outside the courthouse today after watching this first full day of trial, some people did feel that Lori did hold her own, that she did do pretty well, even at times sitting inside the courtroom. Some of the people that were on Lori's side would look at one another and kind of raise their eyebrows as if indicating that they feel that Lori is really doing a fine job. But then, of course, you have the other side of the courtroom where people are just shaking their heads and kind of just rolling their eyes at times with some of the questions, and especially during her opening statement.
Well, everyone on the other side, they all know the whole story, right? But the jury doesn't, and the jury only knows what they see in here in the courtroom. What I think is significant, and hopefully prosecutors pointed out, in that body cam, there is zero emotion. Like, the emotion in court is in complete contrast to the moment when Charles was shot and killed and police responded. So hopefully that wasn't lost on the jury. Kelly Craft, working overtime. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll see you again. When we come back, folks, we will bring in our think tank plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, jury selection continues in the Karen Reed retrial, and tonight we break down some of the crucial evidence in the case. When was Karen Reed's tail light cracked? Tonight we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Doomsday Cult mom is now lawyer Lori.
She's representing herself.
On charges of conspiring to murder her fourth husband.
She said, I can murder you now.
The Cult Mom Conspiracy Trial, live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Belong to something greater.
The evidence will show that Chandler police treated this incident as self-defense.
I object to that.
Objection sustained. The jury should disregard that last statement.
The evidence will show you that my brother, Alex Cox, passed away on December 12th, 2019, almost exactly 5 months to the day after Charles, my husband, passed away. The evidence will show that Alex passed away from a blood clot in his lung.
Objection. Again.
I'll sustain the objection. It's not relevant for this matter.
The evidence will show you that I am the only person being charged with this crime.
I would object to the relevance of that.
Sustained.
The prosecutor objecting throughout Lori's opening statement. Some things that apparently aren't relevant. The death of Alex Cox, the man who shot Charles Vallow. I guess how he died is not important. But if we bring up how he died, I think we should bring up how the other witnesses died as well. Oh, yeah, Lori wouldn't like that if the jury found out how Tylee and JJ died, would they? Okay. Welcome back. Great to have you aboard. Let's bring in our think tank. We've got a great one here tonight. Joining us, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III. Also with us, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crossland. That's not Darnell. That's Darnell. And also with us, the chief public defender for Oakland County, Michigan. Here she is. She represented the Oxford High School shooter, Paulette Lofton. Paulette, a big warning. You don't know these two guys that well. I do. Just be careful. I think you're in a safe spot. I think below me is the safe spot here. You're not in between them. So that's good. Okay. Al, what'd you think of Lori? I mean, people have been surprised. Folks in the courtroom impressed, some of them, with what she presented to this jury. Who they don't know her. They don't know her whole backstory. What they know is what she told them and how she emoted today in the courtroom.
She did a compelling job. I mean, when you take a look at some of the individuals who have represented themselves in court, and I just think 1993, Colin Ferguson, I mean, like just a disaster. She had poise. She was emoting properly. She had the proper amount of emotion when she needed to have it. She seemed to explain away certain things that the prosecution was making a big deal, like the fact that the bat was found on the right side, as opposed to the fact that the decedent was a left-hander, but he was a pitcher. And Vinnie, I know you know this. Pitchers that are left-handed are a high commodity. They never bat lefty. They will always bat righty so they can protect their pitching arm. So
I think you have that backwards, Al. If you're a lefty pitcher and you're batting righty, it's going to expose your left arm.
No, you always go the opposites. Absolutely, you're completely wrong. When you are batting righty, okay, you got your situation is you always bat against where your arm is going to be.
I'm batting righty. This is my left arm, Al.
But what I'm telling,
if I'm a lefty pitcher, I've exposed my left arm right here.
When I look in the mirror, Ben, it's the opposite.
Okay. Well, you might be correct there. Okay. Darnell, were you as impressed with Lori Daybell? I'm not saying she's going to win the case, but like expectations were like way down here. We've seen Darrell Brooks. We've seen Ferguson in New York. What did you think?
Well, definitely was more impressed with her than Al's batting coaching. But what I do want to point out is that you mentioned Jose Baez in your bumper. And yes, he had a way of changing the Casey Anthony trial through his opening. I think what was more important by comparison is that when you look at Casey Anthony compared to Lori Daybell, I think Lori clearly is more convincing, and I think that's something natural that she's portraying there. The other thing is that when she talks about nonchalant, she was totally more nonchalant at the scene of the crime than she was in court. In court, she's a whole different person, and she was convincing. To me, if I was the prosecutor, I'd be so jealous looking over at her, be able to break all the rules and given a leeway. When the judge says the jury would disregard that, guess what the jury's not going to do? Disregard that. They already heard it. So she gets all this leeway. Pro se's get that, and she's taking advantage of that 100%. And I think it's going to be quite effective. Yeah,
and she can bring emotion during her opening statement. Like, lawyers can try it. I mean, I don't, it's kind of tough, but like, they know that she is the one in the middle of all of this. It's such a potential advantage. All right, Paulette, I want you to take a listen to Lori Daybell here talking about the alleged motive.
As the state has mentioned, they are alleging that insurance money was my motive. Social Security was my motive. Spouses having insurance policies is not a crime. Collecting Social Security is not a crime. Self-defense is not a crime. A family tragedy is not a crime. It's a tragedy.
Paulette, to me, you know, in a vacuum, it's a compelling little statement she's making there.
I agree. And I think you were right. She was able to give a 45-minute narrative. That never happens. And she's going to continue to testify throughout the whole trial as she's representing herself. And I think you're right. I think she's likable. I think she's able to connect with the jury. She's showing that real emotion that she should be showing. She's calling him her husband, which is a little funny, knowing what transpired after his death. But I think in her opening, she was able to take what she just heard from the prosecution and properly address it. That is a skill that usually attorneys take a little while to develop. And I think she did well in her opening.
That's great points you're making. The husband thing is interesting too, because Al, at that point, like in real life, she said that Charles was dead already, that he was Ned Schneider took over his body. So now she wasn't married to Ned Schneider, but apparently for the purposes of speaking to this jury in this courtroom in this moment, Charles was her husband.
And that, I picked that point up too. I really did like the fact that she kept calling her husband. The one thing about, she mentioned like with the cross-examination, and that's where things are going to get a little more difficult for her. I think she did a nice job with regards to her opening. You can see with the cross-examination, that is a real difficult trait. And it takes time to be able to develop that. And she would say, well, the individual was nonchalant. Well, that was her brother. I think she should stay saying their names, my brother, my husband, my kid. These things are going to play to a jury well and give her sympathy with regards to same. Considering the fact that, we know everything, that we just deserve sympathy. But, she's very convincing. She was going to lead 144,000 or whatever people into heaven.
Yeah. Well,
so,
she led 5 to the altar, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, she knows how to convince people of certain things. Okay, Al, Darnell, Paulette staying with us for the hour. When we come back, let's take a look at what the prosecution had to say in their opening statement and what they believe the evidence will show as we take a look at that beautiful courthouse in Maricopa County, Arizona.
Lori Vallow, or Lori Daybell, whatever name you want to call her by, is why Charles didn't just leave with JJ that morning. Lori Vallow is why Alex was able to shoot Charles. Lori Vallow is why Charles is dead.
That's the prosecutor in her opening statement, pointing the finger directly at Lori Vallow, Lori Daybell, whatever you want to call her, as being the one. It's the reason. Like, she is the reason. And ultimately, they have to prove that she is the reason that Charles Vallow is dead. Let's take a look at more from her opening statement, because there are some very significant facts and factors and things that happened after the shooting that make Lori look very, very guilty.
The first shot to Charles Vallow was to his chest. It exited out his back. Charles Vallow fell to the ground. He put his left hand to this wound, and blood transferred onto it. You will hear from the medical examiner that this shot went through his heart, and that a person can take seconds to up to 2 minutes to die from that type of wound. You will hear that a person can still talk and move after they're shot in the heart. And we know Charles was able to move since he put his dominant left hand on his chest and transferred that blood to his hand. You will see that. As Charles lay on the floor of 5531 South Four Peaks Place, Alex Cox stood at his feet and fired a second shot. That shot entered his abdomen, and it exited his left shoulder. The physical evidence does not lie. Charles was on the ground when Alex Cox fired that second shot. The injuries to Charles, the location of the bullet strikes, the trajectory of the injuries both in Charles and in the house all show this was not self-defense. This was a staged murder scene. You will learn from the cell phone that at 7:49, Lori left Charles's house, or left her house with Charles's cell phone, his wallet, his rental car, and JJ and Tylee. She drove to Burger King, Walgreens, dropped JJ off at school before she and her daughter Tylee drove back to the house. During this time, while Lori is driving around in Charles's car with his phone, she spoke with her brother Alex twice. The first call was at 7:52 a.m., 3 minutes after she left. The second call was at 8:06 a.m., 17 minutes after she left. You will hear that when Alex and Lori are talking, neither of them had called 911 yet. In fact, you will hear that Alex didn't call 911 until 47 minutes after Lori left. Charles Vallow lay dead on the floor of that house for 47 minutes before he called 911.
Is there any explanation for the 47 minutes? Any explanation for that you can think of? And why would you do that? Let's bring back in our guests. Still with us, Al Wunsch, Darnell Crosland, and Paulette Lofton. Darnell, let me begin with you. Is there any reasonable explanation for the 47-minute delay in calling 911 after a fatal shooting in a home?
Well, this was a little bit harder for me to listen to after hearing Lori's fabulous opening, because she laid out the fact that a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more people to carry out an illegal act. And she went on, maybe I'm paraphrasing. And that's what the crux of her thing was. So it doesn't matter how Cox killed this gentleman, what happened after. Maybe she hated him, even though she's saying husband. But she wants to focus on the fact that they're not showing how I agreed to do this. Now, I think, just to jump over, when the prosecution said Lori, Vallow, or Daybell, or whatever you want to call her, that's not saying what the evidence is going to show. That's argumentative, and that's for closing. So I think she's clearly frustrated. Lori's gotten under her skin, and if Lori can keep that up, she's going to unravel. And so I think she's doing a good job again.
Paulette, the cell phone and the wallet of Charles, why would she take that from the scene? Is there any innocent explanation that she would have for that? And the 47 minutes, 2 phone calls to Alex Cox after the shooting, like the shooting takes place when she's there, she leaves, she calls him twice, 911 is never called. I'm trying to figure out how all of this could ever make sense for a jury.
I think the 47 minutes is going to be a problem because in her opening, she called it a family tragedy. Well, if it was a family tragedy, you would think someone would call 911 immediately and make sure that this person in your family is getting the aid that they need to possibly survive. But I think there is going to be a problem. How do we show conspiracy? Maybe she's a horrible person. She didn't like her husband anymore, and she maybe even wanted him dead. That's not enough for conspiracy. So the fact that she had the phone, the wallet, and the car, we're definitely going to have to wait and see how she spins that. Was the stuff left in the car and she knew that she needed to take their son to school that day and to Burger King because dad had promised him Burger King and she just took the car and whatever was in it? That's one possible explanation. But again, I think, I do think the prosecution's opening was good because there are so many moving parts, and I think that she laid good groundwork, but I don't think she proved conspiracy in her opening.
Al, looking at some of these facts and the way they sort of line up, and we get to the conspiracy to commit murder, right? Because she's not pulling the trigger. I think what prosecutors need to establish is how everything is choreographed that day, how she arranged for everything to happen, from Charles showing up to Alex being there to Alex having a gun. Do they need the smoking gun communications prior to the shooting?
Probably. But, you know, what's interesting is that the prosecutor just said that if a person shot in the heart can live up to 2 minutes after they've been shot in the heart, they can even talk during that. So maybe that's the reason why there was a second shot, because he might have been moving and he may have thought, you know what, he could get up and do something to me. That's why I'm going to shoot again. So I think she contradicted her own argument with regards to that. And in the 47 minutes, if I was Lori, I'd just say, listen, I told him to call. I assumed he called. I mean, why wouldn't he have called 911? I have no idea. And you know, I was just frantically trying to, you know, calm down my kids and deal with that. I figured he'd be smart enough to call 911. And when he did, boy was I surprised. I mean, you know, this is a perfect situation for her, because there's no one that's going to contradict what she says happened there, because all the people that could are no longer there. They're all dead.
Darnell, you know, I think about, you know, the place that the jury has in all of this. You come into this cold. For me, it's so difficult. This is the most difficult case to analyze cold, because this is the isolated case involving Charles Vallow. It's not everything like the other trials were. So, you know what? This could be one of those cases where the jury, not seeing everything, maybe is more apt to give a benefit of the doubt to someone.
Vinnie, I'm laughing because, newsflash, it's supposed to be cold. It's supposed to be isolated. We don't want jurors tainted by other nonsense. And if it's
double murder
isolated,
of 2 witnesses?
Exactly. Who wants to talk about that? You know, we only talk about what happened here. And so as a defense attorney, I like isolation. You know, let's not talk about my client's long criminal record that I have to deal with all the time. It's exhausting. So if it's cold and isolated,
we'll put you in a vacuum court. That's where you need to be. Al Wunsch, Darnell Crossland, and Paulette Lofton, thank you so much. Great to have you tonight. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, Karen Reed and prosecutors picking the jury for the retrial of the century. And tonight, we look at some of the crucial evidence. Did Karen Reed put her SUV in reverse and hit the gas pedal? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
We're here to try and understand the mindsets behind your actions in this case.
Interview with a Killer, a special 2-hour season premiere, Sunday, 8 Eastern and Pacific, only on Court TV.
It's
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. And testifying using her name, we're talking about Cassie Ventura, ex-partner of Sean Diddy Combs, will testify against Diddy using her name at the upcoming sex trafficking trial. 3 other accusers who will testify will remain anonymous. That trial begins on May the 5th. So Cassie will show up and allow prosecutors and everyone else to use her name. Folks, please take a look at your screens. We have a missing child who needs your help. Take a look. This is Mia Annalysse Trevino, missing since March 25th from Moses Lake, Washington. Mia is just 17 years old. Here's what you need to do. If you see Mia, take a look at her photo, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. You can call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Moses Lake Police Department in Washington. That number's on your screen right now. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.